Happy Monday. Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube and brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli with you. Back to regularly scheduled programming. Frank, that's sleep in your own bed the first night back. Top blank sleep of your life.
Unfortunately, I was relegated to the guest room. Megan had COVID last week, so that was fun. It was like a 9.5 out of 10. Could have been made better in my own normal bed, but yeah, banished to the guest room.
Happy to be home. Happy to be back talking hockey with you. And I am very happy that trade deadline is right around the corner, Frank. Next Friday is our big trade deadline show here on Daily Faceoff Live. So cannot wait for that. And I'm just, again, so happy that we're back talking trades. But first, let's dig into what we saw last night over the weekend in the NHL. Frank, it is our nightcap, and it's brought to you by JP Wiser's. Proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience. JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And it maybe wasn't a nightcap yesterday for Alex Ovechkin, but a sneaky one on Sunday afternoon, we'll call it. But a hat trick for the Great Eight. And now he is just 13 goals away from passing Wayne Gretzky for the most all-time, 12 away from tying him up for Ovi. It is his second hat trick of the season, his fifth multi-goal game, and the shot of him going and fist bumping his son on the glass after he scored was so cool. Ovi seems determined. The break did not deter him at all.
The break never deters Alex Ovechkin. Last year, he entered the All-Star break with 8 goals and finished in the 30s. So, look, maybe the biggest winner from Four Nations was not just the NHL and NHLPA for the work that they did and the showcase of the game and getting it in front of all these eyeballs, but maybe the Washington Capitals, the only team in the NHL without a single player selected to a Four Nations roster. Yeah, I mean, I guess the Russian part of that factors in, not having a Russian team in the tournament. But the fact that no one else made it, not a John Carlson on defense or Jacob Chikrin with the 17 goals that he has, maybe the Caps come back not only rested and well rested at that, but with a little chip on their shoulder. And by the way, you look at Matthew Tkachuk and the Florida Panthers, or Charlie McAvoy and the Bruins, or pick a player from Team Canada and his club team. They got through it unscathed without injury too.
Yeah, and that's massive. They come out of the break, Frank, and pop 15 goals in 2 games against the Penguins and Oilers. If you go back, 7 straight games where the Washington Capitals have scored 4 or more goals. Like, that is absolutely bananas. This offense is not stopping. Logan Thompson continued to look like Logan Thompson in the game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. There was a goal in garbage time there, but he was still very, very solid. And I guess before we move off of the talk from last night, like, this Capitals team cementing, in my opinion, not that there was really any doubt or much doubt left, but cementing that they are the top team in the Eastern Conference and the top team in the NHL. Do you think they'll act accordingly at the deadline? And you also kind of winced when I said that. Are you not maybe as all in on them as I am?
It's not that I'm all in. I just think there's a healthy dose of recency bias to it. Like, yeah, they've been good and they've been consistent, and the point total would indicate that they're there. But I'm going to push back against that notion because I'm going to say that the Eastern Conference is wide open. Like, I think the Caps are a good team, but if you were to tell me that the Caps and Carolina, or the Caps and the Panthers, or the Caps and even Toronto squared off in a playoff series and it was a coin flip, I mean, like, I would lean toward that. Like, I don't think the Caps, for as well as they've played and as much as they've run away with their division, when it comes to playoff time, I don't know that I'm putting them levels above anyone else in the East. So that's kind of where I come out on it. Good team who's been super consistent, that has had just about everyone on that team have a kind of career year, that their goaltending's been good every part. I mean, think about the Chikrin stat that I just mentioned. Like, he could score 25 goals this regular season as a defenseman. It's super impressive what Washington has done. And I'm not throwing them any shade. I'm just saying this is also a team that is 0 parts playoff tested for the most part. I mean, last year, an insanely short stay in the playoffs. 2 years prior to that, missed. Like, they've got some questions to answer, I think. And will they act accordingly? My guess is that Washington will go out and try and solve that third line center position. But beyond that, how big of a swing will they take, to your point, to be commensurate to their spot in the standings? I don't necessarily see it.
KPG is in and says only Florida is dominant in the East. And let's stick with the Florida Panthers for a second, Frank. I mean, yeah, you're not buying on that, but also no Matt Tkachuk this weekend. What's the latest there?
So Matthew Tkachuk, Paul Maurice mentioning this morning in his radio interview that Matthew Tkachuk will play again this season. I think that part was kind of clear. I don't know where the rest of that came from. It's a soft tissue injury, groin or hamstring. He's being examined by team doctors today with some imaging that'll give them a better idea on the timeline. Anytime you have an injury like that, it's technically a tear in the fibers of the muscle. How deep is the tear? How big is it? I mean, that part they'll determine by injury. I think we'll see Matthew Tkachuk again in the regular season. The question is it shorter term or longer term? We'll find that out soon.
All right, let's move along. Some more injury news. Obviously, Charlie McAvoy coming out of the Four Nations is not going to be in the lineup for the next while for the Boston Bruins. And then they announced that Hampus Lindholm is done for the year as well. So a couple of major losses on the Bruins blue line, Frank. And listen, they had been in the conversation for the last sort of 3 to 5 weeks here. Is like, are they going to sell? What are they going to do? Are they clinging to life in the playoff race? With all these injuries, did they maybe just make Don Sweeney's decision a little bit easier?
I think that's a really interesting way to frame it. I mean, I don't want to say that they waved the white flag this weekend in his press comments, but man, it certainly seems like a team that has now become one of the most fascinating deadline teams and true wild cards when it comes to which way they turn. I don't think they're going to be adding to beef up this team, but at the same time, I still have a real hard time getting to the point where they trade Brad Marchand. And I know the commentary has been from some Bruin fans. Hey, blow this team up. Let's see the retool. Let's do it. That's not really ever been in their DNA as a franchise. Definitely not how Cam Neely tends to operate. And beyond that, I just think if you move on from Marchand, again, I know there's a limited time window there that he's only going to be that productive for so long. But he doesn't show any signs to me of slowing down. And I'm looking at it going, what's better, 3 or 4 more years of Brad Marchand and competing every year, or beginning the pain to then who knows what the guarantee on the other end of that is? What is Brad Marchand going to bring you that helps put your retool or rebuild over the top? I think fair questions to ask. The other bottom 6 pieces that they're likely to move on from, Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau. I mean, these are guys that aren't going to bring you massive returns. They're going to bring you a couple nice little pieces, but Boston has some serious existential questions to ask about what they're doing moving forward and what's the posture of their team.
Yeah, just looking right now, next season, of the players currently on their NHL roster, only 6 of them are under contract for next season. And the Bruins do have just north of $24 million in projected cap space, according to Puckpedia. So there's a part of me that goes, hey, yeah, keep Marchand, keep these guys. You have some wiggle room with your blue line locked in and the goaltending locked in. You can add this summer if you want to. There's the other part of me that goes, okay, you swung and missed on Elias Lindholm a little bit here. He's not the answer that you thought he would be when you gave him a contract that's nearly $8 million a season. Like, maybe you should sit there and go, you know, David Pasternak's 28. If we sit here and not punt, but keep more of an eye on the future for the next 2 seasons, maybe we can inject a new, fresh core into this team with David Pasternak still in the prime of his career at, call it, 30.
A supporting commentary to that would be, is Jeremy Swayman going to play this poorly again next season? His career numbers would indicate not. He's played 41 or 43 games this year at an .893, including those numbers. For his career in 170-some games, he's at .914. So really his career average prior to this year is closer to .918 or .920. It's covered up. Their goaltending with Ullmark had covered up a lot of their issues that they had in the past. They've struggled to score this year. The center position is abundantly obvious. How do they reshape and fix their defense core is another interesting question. But I think you'd probably expect a bounce back from the Bruins for a season that just went haywire. And by the way, they're still in the mix. I know, like, injuries notwithstanding, like, they're still right there.
And the games just start meaning more and more here in that Eastern Conference playoff picture, too. I mean, you talked about it today on the DFO rundown, but like there are so many teams that are a good week away from being in the driver's seat, but at the same time, a bad 10 days away from being totally out of this race. Frank, we got a hashtag AskDFO question in from Boring Sean Monahan that ties in perfectly to our next topic. He says, what does the Lankinen signing mean for Thatcher Demko and his future with the Vancouver Canucks? On Friday, the Canucks signed Kevin Lankinen to a 5-year extension worth $4.5 million a year. 29-year-old in Kevin Lankinen, who has never appeared in 40 games in an NHL season, although he will hit that milestone, assuming he stays healthy. He'll hit that milestone at some point in the month of March. But what do you make of the Canucks committing to Kevin Lankinen after his strong first half of the season, we'll call it? And what does this mean for Thatcher Demko's future?
Well, the first part is he earned it. He came to Vancouver this year on a true prove-it contract. I think he was hoping to be in that $3.5 to $4 million range as a free agent last summer, and the deals just didn't materialize, and he lingered. Good on the Canucks for recognizing the talent and placing that wager. Good on Lankinen for going out and running with it. I mean, this is a guy that, supplanted UC Saros in Four Nations Faceoff play. He's a talented guy that has taken a while to get to this point, but obviously the Canucks are believers. And what does that mean for Thatcher Demko? To me, I think you only hand out a contract like that if you have an indication that things are going sideways, either by injury or by pure change of scenery. So you asked me on the DFO rundown this morning, will Thatcher Demko be a Canuck next season? My answer was no, but there's a lot that would need to play out, and he does have a not so inexpensive deal that stretches into next season that someone's going to have to figure out. Is it worth buying on Thatcher Demko given what we've seen with his injury history?
And again, $5 million. If I'm a team who's been, chronically looking for a goalie the last however many years, I look at Thatcher Demko and go, well, when he's in the lineup, he's one of the best goalies in the NHL. He played 51 games last year, had a .918 save percentage. But again, the big question of he gets hurt in the playoffs. I guess it would take a doctor to tell you if these kind of issues are one day going to go away. But just on the surface, it's like,
that's the question. Will this popliteus muscle injury in the back of his knee, will he ever be the same again? Yeah. And if the answer is no, I'm not taking the bet. But if the answer is yes, I'm stacking my chips because I'm betting on Thatcher Demko every day of the week.
Thatcher Demko back on the IR once again with the Vancouver Canucks.
And not related, by the way, to the previous injury.
Yeah. Okay. That is actually a really good point and kind of, again, ties into like, how do you view his health going forward? Concernometer, Frank. 1 means you're not worried at all. 10 means fire and sound every single alarm possible. This is a problem. I got 2 questions for you, both about Canadian teams. But the first one, coming off a weekend where the Oilers goaltending did not come through. I mean, it cratered their chances of winning either of their games. They're on a 3-game slide. Concernometer with the Oilers and their goaltending.
So 1 is no concern?
Yeah, 10 is major concern.
4.
Okay.
Like, look at the way they started the season. Look at, I mean, I know it's McDavid, but like they did pour something into Four Nations Faceoff.
Yeah.
And by the way, they had to open up with back-to-backs on the road. I mean, look, no excuses made. Like, you get dropped by the Flyers, like, that's on you. But I also just don't think that there's that much that can be done to reshape this team now. That's why I'm not as 10 sounding the alarms and making all calls to try and figure it. Like, what is there that you can actually do? I think they kind of are what they are, and I think they're a really good team that at varying points takes their foot off the gas and is a reminder of how difficult it is to be consistent in the NHL.
I think that point about taking your foot off the gas is the one I'd look at. And the other thing too is just on a bigger picture, and we're gonna have Carter Hutton on the show later this week, but like the goaltending market's just not there either. The Oilers can't afford John Gibson's contract unless Anaheim retains significant money, and the sense is that they probably won't retain significant money. So what do you do? Like, Karel Vejmelka's just as inconsistent as the other guys. Like, I don't know.
I'm telling you, there's not much they can do, and you've got to figure out this situation with Evander Kane. I had taped a Frankly Speaking episode with Stan Bowman on Friday. That'll drop on Wednesday. I mean, he said point blank, don't need to add a goalie, and beyond that, they're hoping they can get an answer on Evander Kane's health by March 1st to be able to make the correct decisions or appropriate decisions by next Friday.
Yeah. All right. Next Canadian team I wanted to ask you about. Losers of 4 straight, 5-5 in their last 10, and now without Brady Tkachuk. Just as an overall state of the Senators, as they currently do hold the final playoff spot, but they're trending down. What's your concern level?
5. I think the Sens. I do have some concern about Ullmark and his health. I think fair questions to ask before Four Nations. That said, when he's been good, they've been fine. They've competed. I don't think the Brady Tkachuk injury is going to be very long. And I think the Sens and the Red Wings need to turn over every stone possible to make sure that they get in the playoffs. Missing this year would be unforgivable given how wide open it is and given how both of those teams, with the young players that they have, desperately need a taste and an experience. Watching Brady Tkachuk at Four Nations and how ridiculously good he was in pressure moments as a guy driving the bus and dragging his team into the fight. No surprise if you're a Sens fan, but to see it then on a best on best level, man, that has to leave you drooling for what you could see in the postseason. And they have to do everything they can to get there.
Just as a hockey fan, give me that guy in a 7-game series against the best team. They'll be going bananas by the end of game 2, never mind games 4, 5, 6, or potentially 7. Let's keep the trade talk going, Frank. New edition of Icebreakers with your new trade targets board, and it's all brought to you by Tim Hortons. Canada, your favorite contest is back. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons, and that means you could win millions of amazing prizes with just the swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with Sell Off Vacations, a $1,000 Rakuten cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. Even the simple joy of winning a free donut or coffee can make anyone's day, but you only have until March 23rd, so open up that Tim's app and get rolling. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Visit the Tim's app for details. Frank, icebreakers for Tim Hortons. Let's start with, one name who's popping up on your board, Mikko Rantanen. How serious is the chatter and the buzz about the Canes flipping Mikko?
Well, I think it's alive for sure. He's number 40 of 40 on our trade targets board for a reason, though. The number one preference and priority for the Carolina Hurricanes is to re-sign Mikko Rantanen. They've made that part clear. You don't go out and make a trade for one of the true game changers in the NHL and then turn around 30 days later and say, you know what? We're good. That's not what they're thinking here. However, the fact that they have met with the Rantanen camp, the fact that they've put a sizable and significant offer on the table and have gotten a non-committal answer from the Rantanen camp, I think leads to a natural inflection point for the Canes, which is we've done a lot of what we can do. We've made a significant and authentic pitch. If we can't get him to commit by next Friday, should we recoup what we can, or do we roll the dice, hope that we can try and convince him with a deep playoff run and use him with the potentiality that he walks for nothing on July 1st in free agency? I think they're fine if that's the case. They didn't give up a first-round pick. With Marty Necas, he would have been due a significant raise and is eligible for a contract extension as soon as this summer to go from $6 to $9 million. And I don't know that they would have been the team to pay it, but they also have an owner who, as time goes on, seems to chip away at contract extensions, and it takes a while to get done. And they have an owner who might look at this and say, hey, this guy isn't a home run slam dunk. Look at his lack of production so far in this very short, small sample size, that maybe we shouldn't keep him. Maybe we should just rip the Band-Aid off and flip him now. I think the longer this goes on to March 7th without a deal in place, the louder it's going to get. And the Canes are one of those teams that wouldn't have any fear to also do it and see if they could get something back that not just recoups, but maybe even puts them in a better position, better fit.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, again, if they were to keep half of it, all of a sudden the list of teams who'd be interested in Mikko Rantanen, I mean, everyone would be, but you just make the cap hit so affordable that I think there's other teams who start making calls or changing their offers. Do you really think
you mean to tell me a team like Vegas? He's already at 4.7. If you could cut him down to 2.35, which is what the Canes could do, then, like you said, everyone can get in the mix. Vegas would do anything. And then how would the Avs feel having Mikko Rantanen back in the West? Not a good feeling, I think, if you're the Avalanche. So, yeah, there's a lot happening here. And oh yeah, I should point out one thing, because I did see a lot of messages from Hawks fans saying, hey, why don't the Blackhawks get involved? Jump the market. They retained half on him already. You cannot reacquire a player that you already retained on. So they're out of the mix.
That is an interesting note. Also, just to add another wrinkle to what you said about Vegas and Colorado, if the playoffs started today, who does Vegas play round one? Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't that be a story? Frank, I am like wincing as I ask you this next one, but Rantanen was at number 40, last spot on your board. That is a spot that for a while was occupied by Elias Pettersson. He has skyrocketed up, and I'm reading the comments from the other day. Like, I remember whenever it was, a month ago, or no, just under a month ago, when Miller was traded, Pettersson came out and said, I want the added pressure. And then look at last night. He says, quote, it's more annoying dealing with the media. It's an absolute mess. And listen, we've talked about this so many times, but here's the way I want to spin this to you with Pettersson. His no movement clause kicks in July 1 this summer. So they could wait and move him at the draft and not have to deal with his no movement clause. Do you think there's a chance the best offer for him does come in ahead of the deadline? And is that why he moves up your board?
Probably not, because there's other teams that could get in the mix that are playoff teams now that can't really afford him or aren't sure that they want to inject that kind of, if it's chaos, it's chaos. Whatever it is that comes with Pettersson, negativity, trepidation, whatever it might be. This is not my opinion. This is coming from general managers around the league who say, quote, no one would feel good about trading for Pettersson right now. Even the biggest believer would have some kind of worry or fear that the way that he's playing might be locked in. And I think that quote from last night is highly alarming to Ian McIntyre. It was the knee tendonitis. Then it was JT Miller. Now it's the media. It's always someone else's fault but Elias Pettersson. And at some point, when you continue a run of poor play, when your coach comments publicly about you repeatedly throwing pucks away and not shooting, that's on you. It's not on anyone else. So this whole thought process of it's always someone else's fault adds another layer to exactly the conversation we're talking about, which is I'm not certain that teams want to take that on. And if you're from Vancouver's standpoint, the only thing worse than getting little return for Elias Pettersson is being stuck with Elias Pettersson at $11.6 million a year for the next 7 years.
Hey, and that's obviously the question that needs to be answered. Brian asks, is Pettersson the new Dubois? And listen, you can applaud the Washington Capitals for going and taking that shot, and it's working so far this season. Will it work long term? I mean, I guess who knows? But the other side of that,
here's the only difference, Brian, is that Pettersson makes 40% more on the cap than Dubois.
Yeah, and Washington got him for Darcy Kemper, who was a contract they wanted to get off the books from because they had Charlie Lindgren and they acquired Logan Thompson, or they were going to get Logan Thompson. So yeah, it's a mess in Vancouver. We've said that so many times over the last 3-4 months here. Let's keep cruising along. Number 25 on your trade targets board is Erik Karlsson. I'll be honest, Frank, I really don't see a way in which the Penguins can get rid of him. That's why I was surprised to see him pop up here at number 25. I will never stop reminding you about our Barry Bonds earring bet, but just how available is Karlsson, and did the Four Nations change teams' perspective on him at all?
I think it definitely added a question mark of, maybe there is some game left, because we saw Karlsson and he turned back the clock to straight Ottawa Senators days. And it was very surprising. I think the biggest takeaway that I have is just how poor the management has been in Pittsburgh, because you watch Sidney Crosby, you watch Mike Sullivan coach, and you watch Erik Karlsson all have magnificent tournaments. Even Rickard Rakell is pretty good. And you sit back and you go, how is it possible with those pieces that this team is as bad as it is? They should be way better. And especially for Sid's sake, you watch the game that he still has left and you're thinking, how do we get to this point? But Karlsson has been vocal in the last 6 weeks about wanting an opportunity to win. That's obviously not happening in Pittsburgh, where they're closer to a top 5 pick than they are to a playoff spot. And the tougher part is his contract. The Penguins have one retained salary transaction slot left. It would behoove them, even all those things said, because of the direction that they're trending in, to retain as much as they can for 2 years and get something good in return for Karlsson. But can you trade Rickard Rakell at full boat? Is there anyone else that you'd rather use that last retained salary transaction slot on from now until July 1st, until a new one opens up? All important questions, but I do think Karlsson's play at Four Nations opened up a couple eyes saying, whoa, what if there's something here still?
Yeah, both Petrie and Riley Smith, who are their 2 other retained slots, are done on July 1, as you kind of alluded to there. So yeah, move one of Karlsson or Rakell now, keep some money. Then if you want to, it does get difficult when you're retaining on guys who have somewhat significant term, 2 more years for Karlsson, 3 more for Rakell. But one of the many, many tough decisions Kyle Dubas is going to have to make over the next few months leading into the summer. Frank, great stuff as always. Full trade targets board up at dailyfaceoff.com. That's a wrap for this week's edition of Icebreakers, brought to you by Tim Hortons. Moving along to our Daily Faceoff inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. Frank, you hinted at the Detroit Red Wings when I asked you about the Ottawa Senators, and that prompted Matt, a Wings fan in our chat, to say, what's a realistic asking price for Bo Byram? Are the Sabres okay with futures, or do the Sabres want something for now?
That's the tough part for a team like the Wings, is the Wings have some futures they could deal, but the Sabres aren't interested in futures. They want pieces that can help them, obviously not for this season because they're dead last in the East, but for the future, meaning next year, like immediately next year. And I just don't know what the Wings could move to satisfy that, which I think makes them pretty poor trade partners, Matt.
Yeah, like I was kind of scrolling through their roster here, and I was like, okay, like obviously you're not trading an Edvinsson or a Sider in this deal. That would be bananas. But if you're the Red Wings and you're going, okay, we really want to win now and get in, and we have Sider and we have Edvinsson, and we believe that, a guy like Byram can grow with our core, would you offer up an Axel Sandin Pellikka? I don't know what you need to put on either side to make it work. But again, would Buffalo want a guy who's a year or 2 away?
No, I don't think so. And beyond that, I do, like Matt, I wonder if the style that Bowen Byram plays, is he a fit? Like the best thing that the Red Wings can do in the short term is stack up just really good defensemen on top of one another and get to 6 bona fide NHL defensemen, which they're not at right now. Mm-hmm. But stylistically, like I think they need good defenders, if that makes sense. Not to say Byram isn't, but just more on that side of the puck than anything else.
Yeah. We got another one in that I think would take us 3 hours to discuss. What do you think the problem is with the Sabres in this 13-year rebuild? Yeah, I mean, we don't have time for that.
Yeah, you're going to have to try again later.
But let's get along to our daily bets.
I don't even know that we could solve that in an hour podcast.
That's fair. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 2 games on tap. I got a shot prop parlay for you. A couple of guys who have been crushing it as of late. Tyler Toffoli has hit in 4 of 5. Thomas Hertl has hit in 5 in a row for the Golden Knights. These two together is plus 360. Again, Toffoli 4 of 5, Hertl 5 in a row. These guys have been crushing it, and I love the plus 360 price tag on that. And Frank, we'll wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. You mentioned Frankly Speaking with Stan Bowman on Wednesday. How about a new edition of the podcast with Marty Walsh, the head of the NHLPA? Let's take a listen into his comments on the Four Nations Faceoff.
There were some people heading into this thinking, hey, we might not see that. This might be like a more like an all-star weekend. And I was saying the whole time, with how hard it was to make this team and what's on the line, you put your country's jersey on, you're going to see NHL players deliver.
Oh, my God. You think about Finland and Sweden. I mean, they're not in the final game, but they played till the last minute of every game. The Finland-Canada game the other day. I mean, people were like, oh, they had already chalked hand up as a win. Finland scores 2 quick goals. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. This isn't over. And, these players are you hear them talking about the intensity of this tournament and the intensity of the games. And They do take it serious. Representing their country, they take very serious. We have some of the greatest hockey players in the world playing over the last week and a half, and they all gave it their all.
Frank, what else stood out for you in your chat with Marty Walsh?
Well, we just got into a whole bunch of different stuff. CBA, salary cap. Obviously, the NHL and NHLPA are about to, it feels like any day now, begin negotiations on the next CBA. And it would be amazing to see labor peace worked out for the next foreseeable future between these two sides, where that's been hard to come by. This partnership and relationship between the NHL and NHLPA, which was on display for everyone to see at Four Nations, has reached a level that I wasn't sure was possible. And Marty Walsh deserves a huge amount of credit for that, because the relationship between the two sides has changed. And I asked him specifically about that. So dive in, and there's a whole bunch to chew on.
Frankly Speaking, find it wherever you get your podcast from, or right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. That's a wrap on today's edition of the show. Tomorrow, Carter Hutton and more. We're here every weekday, though, noon Eastern. Trade talk only heating up. Thanks for tuning in. Hit like, hit subscribe before you close your window, and join us again tomorrow, noon Eastern. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli, to analysis from former NHLers, to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.